I mean, often one thing that's often pointed out is, well, I mean, the US spends much more than any other country on defense. Of course, you've got an important role in the world economic or the world geopolitical order, or however you'd like to describe it. So have you looked at that, and do you have any thoughts on defense?
No, not just defense, but so the way that the budget is allocated in the U.S. context is that there is a so-called discretionary spending, which makes up roughly 1/3, and then there is the so-called mandatory or autopilot spending, and the key difference is that discretionary spending has to be voted on each and every year. For example, this week, the U.S. Congress is voting on defense and non-defense discretionary spending to avert a government shutdown because we're at the end of the fiscal year. That is not the case for programs like Medicare and Social Security and even Medicaid, which have authorizations, which have spending allocations that don't expire, so they can just continue spending even when the resources aren't there. But both non-defense and defense discretionary spending has seen large increases, especially during the pandemic. There's been large increases in non-defense discretionary spending for a variety of things, including support for state and local government to weather the pandemic, various handouts for special interest groups. We just recently saw the CHIPS Act pass for the semiconductor industry in the United States, and then the Inflation Reduction Act, which had a lot of Green New Deal policies to subsidize green energy and electric vehicles, et cetera. So there's been, while that spending, it doesn't get projected out over the extended periods, 30 years, 50 years, 75 years in the case of Social Security and Medicare, because Congress appropriates it every single year. We are seeing a rise in discretionary spending, also in the area of emergency and disaster relief, with no budget or notional account to control that spending. So it's often used as a loophole to fund other priorities without going through the regular budget process. And yes, overall, I'm concerned about most aspects of the federal government being on a growth trajectory, and defense and non-defense discretionary spending are very much in that sphere as well.
Okay.
So one solution there is to adopt spending caps, and the U.S. has adopted those with some success in the past, with a little less success in the recent past. But discretionary spending caps that set a goal or a level that then lawmakers have to fight over, or the public can hold them to account for, can be very helpful. We don't have any discretionary spending caps right now. And I think it sets up a good discussion when you have those to say, okay, if you truly believe that that is not sufficient, you need to spend more, what can we cut instead? And then in the more likely scenario, lawmakers are not going to want to cut anything. So instead, we get some discussion over offsetting spending cuts elsewhere, say in the mandatory portion of the budget, or if they agree to a spending increase, at least now we have something we can hold them to. So I do think it sets up a productive debate around the purpose of spending limits, priorities for the federal government, what are true priorities and what are just one-and-a-halves for favorite lobbying groups, so that the public can do a better job also of holding their lawmakers accountable. And there is an opportunity for the U.S. Congress, the new Congress in the next year, to impose more spending restraint. The debt limit will approach again, likely next summer, in the summer of 2023. And the debt limit is often a very effective action-forcing mechanism for fiscal restraint. Basically, lawmakers can make demands that they won't increase the debt limit unless there are offsetting spending cuts or a budget plan is put in place. And I think a spending caps over the entire federal budget would be best, so that Congress can budget within so-called unified budget, consider all priorities and needs within context, and then make those necessary trade-offs. But one one good start, and those are easy to implement, would be discretionary spending caps on defense and non-defense.
Right. Okay, I'll have to look back and see look for some examples of those spending caps in the past. That sounds really interesting. So yes.
Yeah, we had the Budget Control Act of 2011 that imposed spending caps for a period of roughly 10 years, but they were circumvented several times. But there were also some offsetting spending cuts to allow for those increases in defense and non-defense. The other thing that has become sort of gimmicky in the US context under President Obama, and the Democrats are continuing to try and push this, is this idea of parity, that the defense account and the non-defense domestic discretionary accounts should be getting the same amount of money, which is just a goal that they have set as if this was some kind of a political game without any consideration for real needs, either in the domestic economy or on the defense side, the threats that the United States face. It's just an arbitrary target. We just want to get as much money as the other guys, and that just doesn't make any sense at all. And I think the public should call lawmakers out for that. Parity doesn't make any sense. We should not be allocating any more spending than is necessary, and it should also be within the bounds of the U.S. Constitution, because that document has a purpose, which is to restrain the government and protect the rights of the individual. And so that should be our guidance for what to spend money on and how much to spend, not some arbitrary goal of we just want parity because it's political.